when we're on these projects that the students are reflecting at the end of the day and thinking about, what are the qualities we see in the leaders that we're looking at? How are they getting the community to work on these problems? How do they interact with them? What are the things that you're noticing? So students really start to pick out, when we talk about the phrase ethical, or the, what an ethical leader is, we really help them try and parse and see those qualities in the people that we're working with. So our NGO partners really are the heart of our organization, in the sense that they are the inspiration for our students as well as the teachers.
You're listening to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast. Here's your host, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here with another great episode of Relish This. Today's guests are Bob Bandoni and Bill Cotter from Students Shoulder to Shoulder. This amazing organization has a really strong vision, and their vision is of a future where leaders around the world come to their positions from the perspective of ethical purpose. They accomplish this through mentorship opportunities that place students shoulder to shoulder with NGOs and the beneficiaries they serve to learn leadership skills that come from a place of caring. One really great part of our discussion centered on ensuring alignment when taking on partners to create a stronger, more cohesive connection between the two organizations. This helps you supercharge your storytelling and engage all your stakeholders effectively. Check out this episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Hey guys, how are things going today?
I guess I'll jump in, Bill. Things are good in Colorado.
Yes, they are. I have Bob and Bill from Students Shoulder to Shoulder today, and really excited to have you guys on the show. Well, I'd like to I'll hand it over to you guys actually here to tell our audience a little bit more about your organization. And
Okay. Well, maybe Bill, a little bit of a kind of a brief history of
Sure.
our organization might help a little bit. And Bill, maybe you can jump in and talk a little bit about today's programming. Maybe that'll give people a perspective. I think the place to start is probably what really initiated the idea behind Students Shoulder to Shoulder, and that and the start of that is really when the century turned, and I think what was initiated by this onslaught of communication technology was the ability for all of us to be able to look in the backyards of everybody around the world. And what we saw was just inequities, really pressing problems that were organized in the early 2000s, I think 2002, 2003, in a combined effort with the United Nations into what was called then the global goals. And what we saw was a number of the major sectors in our society responding to that. Schools were educating for global skills. I think they call them 21st century skills. Corporations and businesses were talking about corporate social responsibility. Major foundations were talking about the big idea. And the person who helped the United Nations actually develop these goals also wrote a book at that time. His name was Jeffrey Sachs, and he wrote a book at that time called The End of Poverty. And at that point, I was teaching ethics in a small K through 12 school. And some of this material was part of my curriculum, but it was what was clear to me was a number of people had good intentions, but were still part of the problem. And the problem being that instead of working collaboratively, there were all of these efforts still in individual silos, was one issue. And the other issue was, as nobody at that time was talking about the role of education in addressing this and addressing what we were seeing and uncomfortable with that was happening around the world. So we had the idea in a small school to say, well, why don't we connect with some nonprofits and see if we can somehow use the work of the nonprofits as a way to stir kind of the moral imaginations of young people as they see themselves in the future, in their own future, and as they see themselves as leaders. So we started at that point, just at a school level, putting together what we called programs, which was basically flying to because these were this school was in Colorado, and all these sites were outside of Colorado our first year. This was 2007. So this was the first summer we could safely go to New Orleans after Katrina. So we went 3 places, actually: New Orleans and India and also Nepal. And the idea was, well, if we just go to do service work, is what we called it at the time, we thought that unto itself would be a tremendous learning opportunity for students. What happened was, when they came back, it was much more than that. It was not only a learning experience unto itself, but it was transformative. Students came back and described their experiences as if, and I'll say this metaphorically, but it was quite powerful, as if they had gone to another planet. They had seen humanity in a way that they didn't know humanity actually existed. And I will tell you, students who were in rural India had no greater transformation than those that went to post-Katrina New Orleans. I specifically remember kids coming back from New Orleans, some of them with tears in their eyes, couldn't believe that they lived in the same country. So their inspiration became our inspiration, our being myself and a couple of teachers in the school. We saw it and thought, my goodness, there is power in this well beyond what we had imagined in our theory. So that was, so the start of Shoulder to Shoulder was then, well, wait a minute, if we have all of these people with good intentions, all of these sectors, I should say, not working together, instead of our trying to do the same thing, why don't we create an organization of partners? Why don't we create an organization that brings nonprofits together with schools, with businesses, with philanthropists, bring them all together and try to create a synergy that is what we call a shared value, meaning that everybody who comes to the table is bringing something unique from their sector, from their particular organization, and they're all leaving the table with something unique. And so that's where the idea of Shoulder to Shoulder, where the organizational model and the roots of the programmatic model actually began.
So as Bob mentioned, Students Shoulder to Shoulder started out with those three programs. I came to know the organization in 2012 when they gave a presentation at a school that I was working at. So I was a teacher at an international school, and Bob actually was giving a presentation about Students Shoulder to Shoulder and the idea of it. And as a classroom teacher, I think I had felt the same pains of students of, well, yeah, we're learning all this stuff, but what about what's happening out in the real world? How can we get out and do it? And I was definitely on their side. So when I heard about Students Shoulder to Shoulder, I instantly wrote to the team at that time to ask if I could be a course instructor. So those are the people who lead our summer courses, and they're all teachers from our partner schools. So actually my first experience with Students Shoulder to Shoulder was leading a course in Bolivia with a group of students. And I think similar to what Bob said with those students coming back, I was in Bolivia with 10 students for 3 weeks. And then the other instructor with me was actually an alumna of Shoulder to Shoulder who'd gone on the original course, and just learning about Shoulder to Shoulder from her perspective and seeing the change in the students just over those short 3 weeks. We were in Bolivia supporting a nonprofit that builds water filters to deliver to indigenous communities so they have access to clean water. And seeing the students reflect each day and really think deeply about the world and the things happening in the world and how vastly different their lives were from those of the people that they were working with in Bolivia, and also how similar they were as well, to me was like, wow, this is a really powerful program. So I stayed involved as a volunteer course instructor, leading a few different courses for Shoulder to Shoulder, and then came on full-time in 2016 to help with programming, which really is where Bob's description left off. And so since those three programs, we have expanded our programming to include 7 sites overseas and 4 sites in the United States. And similar to that first, those first 3 courses, really the idea is that we put students shoulder to shoulder with inspiring nonprofit leaders and the communities that they serve. So the idea, different from, I think we get sometimes lumped in with, like traditional service programs that we're here to help or we're here to build stuff and be saviors, is we really take a learning service approach. So the idea is that we are here as a group of students with 2 teachers to learn from this nonprofit, both about their mission and vision and why they exist. So there's a curriculum to help students think about why is there a problem related to girls' education in Nepal, for example, or clean water in Bolivia? What are the systems causing this thing to happen? And then the service work that we do really is a way for students to learn about what the nonprofit does on a day-to-day basis, as well as a way to get shoulder to shoulder with the community members and get their hands dirty and have conversations, right? So it's, high school kids aren't necessarily going to be the best people at teaching English or building water filters, but when they're there doing that work with the people from the community, you look to the person next to you and you just start having these conversations that wouldn't come up if you put, a group of people in a circle and just had them start talking. So it's those conversations that come from the work that I think are really inspiring for students. And then we also have a curriculum when we're on these projects that the students are reflecting at the end of the day and thinking about, what are the qualities we see in the leaders that we're looking at? How are they getting the community to work on these problems? How do they interact with them? What are the things that you're noticing? So students really start to pick out, when we talk about the phrase ethical, or the, what an ethical leader is, we really help them try and parse and see those qualities in the people that we're working with. So our NGO partners really are the heart of our organization, in the sense that they are the inspiration for our students as well as the teachers. So we now call our program Field Studies, because really students are studying the idea of ethical leadership in the field, shoulder to shoulder with our nonprofit partners, and also within the communities that those nonprofit partners serve.
That's a really cool model. I think, putting people in proximity to both those types of groups is that's really kind of transformational, isn't it?
Yeah, and I should have said that's a word that Bob and I often come back to, is that idea of proximity from Brian Stevenson, I think, who's wrote about it and talked about it so much. But the idea that it's really hard to understand an issue if you're not proximate to it, and so we're not going to come back with the solution to education or clean water or things like that. But by getting proximate to the people who are working on that issue and getting proximate to the problem, you have a deeper understanding than if you were just back in Colorado or wherever you were, studying about water issues or studying about education. It really is that proximity piece that I think for us that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that model, and I think that's neat that you guys came into that, kind of got on the ground and as you were kind of figuring it out. Is that how it evolved?
It did, and it has layered since. So, and the concept of proximity is a good segue into that, because we also felt as though if we were going to be honest to the theory and to the approach and to the idea of partnership, concept of shared value, that it was going to be important to bring partners together. And I thought at that time at least once a year. And that has evolved into an annual event we now call the Ethical Leadership Forum. And so that includes bringing our NGO leaders. We've done it to this point in Colorado. So we actually, if they're overseas, we fly them in from these small villages and so on. We actually fly them into Colorado, and it deepens the relationship that we have with our NGO nonprofit partners. We also invite our business partners, and we also invite our philanthropic partners. Because we don't want, when we say philanthropic partners and business partners, we don't want that to just be subtle code for people who write us checks. Because we think that there's a problem in that kind of traditional mentality. The problem being that the person, if you will, writing the check is doing so to assuage conscience or something, when they could inevitably, or they could be contributing to a problem without knowing it. So we've really built an organization around relationships and around trust. And to have that, people have to spend time together. And so not only are we sometimes refer to where we go, backyards, other people's backyards, we also want to bring everybody at one time to one backyard. So that we can talk about what we're doing, we can present ideas to each other, and again, we can deepen the relationship, strengthen the trust. So that model is, again, what we call an organization of partners, has now evolved to what we call our shoulder-to-shoulder network. And that is everybody involved with shoulder-to-shoulder, from our NGOs to our business partners to our schools, and perhaps more importantly, or most importantly, our alumni. So the idea is, what we came to understand, and especially in working with young people, it's wonderful to see young people inspired, and we saw that for a few years, and then we felt as though that we wanted more, and we wanted more because they wanted more. They came to us and said, "Now what?" And what I'm talking about is a high school kid having an experience in like this, and then getting a hold of us once they're in college, and saying, "Hey, do you have anything for me? That was such a transformative experience. I'm really have the desire to do something more." And so we developed this network to now serve the mission. Our mission is basic. It's just to inspire and support ethical leadership. And we now address not only high school students and schools and so on, but our alumni all the way through their early careers.
Yeah, that's really great. I like.
So that's kind of the evolution of that model.
To engage with those stakeholders and those constituents. We call that kind of the inspire phase of engagement, where you've brought someone in and you've created this relationship with them. And so many organizations and for-profit businesses just sort of drop the ball there, and they kind of look at that as, okay, well, we did what we were planning to do, and everything's great, and we can now move on. But really, there's such a huge amount of power in that inspire phase, where you have somebody who is so ingrained in your organization and so passionate about it. And so to be able to tap into that and allow them to continue that journey and elevate them to a new level, or allow them to go out and evangelize for the organization and get more people into the fold is a really incredible way to leverage all of that experience and all that knowledge and all that kind of sunk cost into that relationship, to make it go even farther.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's just coming into fruition now. Our oldest alumni are turning 31 this year, but they're in hospitals, they're in courtrooms, they're on Wall Street, they're in schools, they're in businesses. Some of them have started their own business, and so it's intriguing to us. But in so many ways, we feel as though that group is and will be in their evolution the manifestation of our mission, because they truly are working their way into leadership positions, and we feel obligated, given that how we started with them was the inspiration piece. We feel obligated to continue the inspiration and to do that through opportunities that are that align with where they are developmentally, where they are in their lives. Again, they're in college, they're just graduated from college, they're moving into their professions, and we feel, I guess, an obligation to them and to our mission.
That's great. What activities are you guys
continue that kind of stimulation
undertaking to keep that group in the fold?
Yeah, that's just starting, and so there are a couple of them. The first one actually is the forum. So they are they're invited to it as speakers, as panelists, and that gets them into this. It keeps them in this conversation, and Bill, maybe you could talk a little bit about
so I mean,
some of what else
part
they're
of it
doing
is
as far
we've
as
played around with
teaching
different
goes
ways
and so on. I
to
think
connect
it's pretty
them
exciting.
as a network. We've tried lots of, building our own technology, using things out there, and we've recently settled on Mighty Networks as a really powerful and easy way for us to build community. So that's sort of the behind the scenes part, where we actually have our shoulder to shoulder network. So we have our alumni, we have past educators, we have our NGO partners, and it provides a really easy, clean space for all of us to communicate with each other. And it's really, we've come upon that, I think, in the past year. And so we're working now on bringing everyone into that network. And I think this summer we had, when we're just building out this network and inviting people into it, because of the pandemic, we couldn't do our normal summer travel-based programming. And so we developed a few online guided courses and put the idea out. And we actually had alumni who are now in university or just out of university who put their hand up and said, yeah, I would love to either teach these courses or I'd love to be a mentor to high school students. And for us, it was sort of that aha moment of, wow, this is really coming together. So we had a course. One of the courses we offered this summer was from ideas to action. So it was helping high school students take an idea that they'd been thinking about related to something that was happening in their own community and try and move that idea to an action step by the end of the summer course. And Bob and I supported the course in terms of, from the technology standpoint, setting it up, being there, but really it was led by 4 of our alumni, 2 of which who had started a program on their own campus at the Asheville School, which was a summer camp for low-income youth. And so the course really was a case study about this thing, which they had a video about and they had created, which was amazing. But they really started with, okay, here's the final product that you're seeing when you watch this video. But what was it like to go from, hey, we should start this thing on campus to, hey, we've started this thing on campus? And so it was really amazing to see these students who are now in university walking high school students through their experience of taking this idea and turning it into action. And so since then, we've offered courses this past fall, again, led by our alumni. And I think that's really the beginning that we're starting to see of having alumni coming back into the fold after they've had a shoulder-to-shoulder experience and now being the people who are mentoring and leading current high school students.
Yeah. Stu, if you can imagine this, I'll connect this to our forum. So our forum this year, we had to do it online because of the pandemic. And we attracted over 400 people, 16 countries. And these were people running businesses. We had medical doctors. We had professors. We had finance people from all over the world. If you can imagine this, that what our dream is someday, and NGOs as well, teachers, schools, so on and so forth. But someday, and actually it's starting in very small percentages, but someday when we look across all those sectors, you probably know where I'm going with that, at the forum, they're all going to be alumni, or a large percentage of them will be alumni. Now, that's going to take years and years, and I'm sure I will be
right.
I'll be well checked out at that point, not checked out of the organization, checked out of life. But because our the big idea here is not to look at this as a zero-sum game, but to just keep making the table bigger and bigger and bigger, and inviting more and more people, more diversity, so on and so forth. Everybody standing on the common ground of seeing that all of these pressing issues on the planet have one tap root, and that is the need for ethical leadership. And so that's, we're trying to build the shoulder-to-shoulder network, our alumni group, with this in mind, that they're carrying the torch, but instead of just writing them 20 years from now, it's every year. Well, it's throughout each year, we just keep tapping them on the shoulder, giving them opportunities, these kinds of opportunities.
I think that's great that you're offering people
that's where we
a variety
hope to go.
Of different ways to continue to engage with the organization. And it's not just, give us a testimonial and away you go,
Yeah.
or send us some money and that'd be awesome. But there's
Yes.
a variety of ways to continue to give to this idea of ethical leadership across the globe, and I think that's great. What's your uptake on it? Do you think that your numbers are where you want them to be, or obviously almost everyone feels like they'd like to do more, but how do you feel like that is working for you right now?
Yeah. I'll just jump in quickly here, Bill. We're just warming up. We were on a tremendous roll coming out of 2019, and of course we, along with everybody else, got torpedoed by the pandemic. But in some ways, what the pandemic has revealed is everything we saw. A lot of people saw years ago. We sometimes refer we refer to people that are most vulnerable as having comorbid conditions. Well, that's where we work. And so for us, when we looked at this, we saw this as even a louder calling than what we saw before, the need for ethical leadership. I mean, you can see the paucity of that. It doesn't take, you only need to pick up a newspaper or turn on the TV, and you can see the problem with leadership around the globe. So we feel very, very strongly about the mission. Realities when it comes to money, it's that's a struggle. But again, and we feel as though, I don't know, Bill, you might want to comment on this, but I feel like we're not necessarily realizing economies of scale yet in our growth. And
I would just add, I think on
over the next few years,
in terms of both the scale of the organization and financially, I think we feel like we have a model that's been proven, but we'd really like to make sure that it is available to, increasing the number of students that we having on our programming, increasing either, the number of our nonprofit partners, or it could look like us taking, normally we take one group per summer to work with our nonprofit partners. So also if we expand the amount of students that we're working with, we could be taking more than one group to our nonprofit partner, which obviously benefits them in numerous ways as well. So I think right now we're really happy with how the model works, but we really like to scale that model for impact so that we are having greater impact with our NGO partners, as well as having more students that we're impacting. And then of course, to scale that impact on the financial side, of course, having money to help with that scaling in terms of staffing. We were a staff of 4 before the pandemic, and now, we're a staff of 2. And so I think not a day goes by that Bob and I continue to build the list of ideas. We're like, if we can get, one more person, here's what we could do. If we get two more people, here's what we do. And obviously so that financial aspect, I think, would help us grow, as an organization, really scale the ideas, because every day that we are checking stuff, our to-do list, I think that the other side of the to-do list is just getting bigger with ideas for how we could really grow the organization.
Right. It's that too many hats syndrome that most people kind of go through, particularly when, in the early phases of their organization. Have you done any work to identify those pieces that could be handed off if you had more staff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think recently we've been talking, just in one particular area in terms of our educational impact. I think even after the pandemic is over and the travel aspect of our organization gets back to running as normal, we've seen the flexibility that we have with being able to create programming, remote-based programming where students from anywhere in the world can join us. And so we would really like to continue to work with schools and students in a remote-based format. So having someone else, on the education front who's helping to support that programming in addition to the summer programming is definitely one thing that we've come up with. And Bob, I'm sure you could add things as well.
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit, Bill, because
Gotcha.
Stu, Bill and I were on Bill? I don't know, 2-hour conversation today on that very topic. And there are a couple of key variables that will lead growth. One is the one that should always lead is that which is meaningful to people, that which is mission driven, and that which deepens, broadens the value we're bringing to people. And that's what Bill's talking about as far as our reach to schools, and what we can do that schools can't do on their own, but that they can do with us. And to add a dimension that we just brought in our first international school into our organization. They're in Guadalajara, Mexico. And our goal is to bring in schools from multiple continents. We have NGOs right now on 4 continents. Well, we would like students from 4 continents as well. And if you start actually with schools and students on 4 continents, and we have NGOs on 4 continents, that's going to bring in philanthropists, that's going to bring in businesses. And what you're doing is you're back to that original idea of lowering the barriers between people, between sectors, and using the basic concept of collaboration in bringing these groups together to really animate this mission of inspiring ethical leaders. But we feel as though growth is important, but not growth just in a singular plane, but inclusive growth. And so, yeah, we're talking about that. We actually have plans for it.
Right.
We do need backing for that. And it's not a lot, actually. I think we create a lot of synergy between our partners. But we feel as though we're probably just a couple of hires away from being able to really expand our impact in a way that we hope will start.
So in that same line, or
just having a greater influence on culture
in terms of fundraising, what would those numbers be? What do you think you're looking at in terms of increase in revenue in, let's say, Q1 of 2021 to enable you to take some of those hats off and hand them over to some other people?
Yeah. Wow. Well, we've been thinking about that as well. And I feel as though
Okay.
I look at it, I don't look at it over quarters. I look at it over years. And I believe that we could, over a 4-year period, we could begin to have a significant cultural impact if we could expand in the ways I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I think we can do that for $1 million over 4 years. So for $250,000 a year, 4 years running, not only can we do that, but I think the growth, as we've modeled it out, the growth will also make us self-sustaining. And so at that point, the money that we would be raising would be going to lowering the barrier of entry, basically meaning moving to a needs-blind admissions policy. Right now, I don't think we've ever turned anybody down for admissions into our programming, students. And we're always kind of knocking on doors, hands out, so on and so forth. But I think there's probably self-selection as well. I think probably students select out because they don't think it's possible. But we want to get to a point, and Bill and I were just talking about this too, we feel very, very strongly that if we're serious about developing a community, an international community of leaders around the world, that the inspiration that's going to start that has to be across socioeconomic lines. It can't just be for kids whose parents can afford this while they're in high school. It's got to cross those barriers. And so if we can get to that point that's self-sustaining, then any money that we can bring in, all of that can go to a needs-blind process. Well, and I think we'll just be off to the races if we get there.
Of having that multi-year plan is fantastic, and it's certainly part of what we would talk about in terms of a vision exercise, where you're looking long term and you're really trying to come up with this aspirational future state in which your programs have made a difference, and so that becomes that vision piece. And certainly you have the values foundation that drives that vision, and the mission kind of becomes this tactical, more not quite day to day, but certainly what are we doing? What do we get up and do on a daily basis that leads us toward that that 3 to 5 to 10 year vision? And funding is a core component of that. In terms of how do you align your fundraising with that values, vision, and mission as well, so you're not just taking money from from anybody, but that those people are on board with the program as well. And it sounds like you have
exactly
you have donors and you have some business partners. I'm guessing that those are do you call them sponsors, or are they more business donors? Okay.
We call them partners because they contribute in various ways.
Okay.
Actually, not very many of them write a check.
Okay.
They contribute through their expertise.
Well, I think that aligns with your, it certainly aligns with this vision component where you're trying to create lifelong participants. Are you trying to engage with any businesses that are doing, cause marketing or anything like that? Are you going out and Okay.
Well, not real. I'm suspicious of that. So, just as you said a little bit earlier, to look for people who really embrace the mission. And I had somebody write me a check, and I told them I couldn't take it. And they looked at me. It was kind of this long hesitation. I said, they had heard me speak, and they just wrote a check. And I said, well,
Okay.
I would love for you to contribute, but we need to sit down and have a conversation first.
Okay, good.
And we did that, and we talked for about 45 minutes, and then they wrote the check. We are, we're that serious about what we do. I would tell you that I think our mission is actually not that well written. Our mission is more of a strategy than the mission. I mean, the mission probably would be simply stated as bringing a kind of this weaving of justice and compassion to the world.
Right.
We look at it in that kind of a broad term. The strategy for doing that is creating this international community of ethical leaders.
Okay. Yeah.
And then everything we do behind that I would say our method.
The way that we talk about it.
Our method.
Just using slightly different language, but yeah, you have this vision of a better world. And then the mission becomes kind of the tactical ways that you're doing that. So you envision this better world through, this integrated leadership kind of component where you're putting people in shoulder to shoulder with communities and nonprofits to learn how to be a more effective and ethical leader.
Yes. Right. Yeah. We just believe that being prosperous as an individual or as an organization or however you want to see that, a company, is not mutually exclusive from contributing to the public good. That those two should be blended. and that's
I think
kind
that's,
of the
that's a good way to look at it
core
for sure.
of ethical leadership for us.
So in your goal, I mean, I love the story that you just told, where you had someone who just wanted to write you a check, and you said, well, no, let's make sure everything's aligned here before we go down that path. I think that's not only is it a great way to just stick to your guns in terms of what you want to engage in and how you want to get there, but it also really cements this idea of relationship building and the idea that you want people to be on board with the whole enchilada, and not just the side dish. And so I really like that you I think you could probably use the word courage, that you had the courage to say, well, hold on, let's talk about this first. So have you thought about ways to kind of create that vibe where people need to be vetted to participate in, even as a donor?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in there, Bob, quick. And I think we've become a lot better at messaging what our organization does and how each partner group contributes to that. So I think, in the past few months, we've really honed in on that, and we're working on building that messaging out on our new website, as well as in a lot of materials. I think we've become a lot more concise. We have some one-pagers that we are using with donors and businesses, as well as a new packet that we've designed for businesses. And I think we've become much more clear in our language about why Shoulder to Shoulder exists and what the roles of each partner group, so that when we're out there, and Bob is the one who's out there, speaking with businesses and donors, it's really clear to them what they are getting involved in. So I think one way we've done that is really just by honing in and improving our message and becoming concise and clear in what is our big why and how, businesses and donors can contribute to that bigger why.
Right. I'm wondering if there's not a way, and this is a little bit of an off the wall sort of idea here, but a way to create some exclusivity, even in being a donor, in being this, this primary function of nonprofits in terms of fundraising is getting donors on board, and creating this idea that in order to donate, you need to have participated in some component, whether that's a one-on-one conversation, which certainly doesn't scale particularly well, but might be an interesting thing to do in the short term, to just sitting in on a one-to-many kind of webinar, or even watching a video that you put out there that's kind of a roadblock to donorship. I mean, I don't know that I've seen anyone doing that, but it's certainly an interesting idea that I think would be a differentiator, as well as would perhaps increase, maybe it decreases the number of donors that you get, because it's there is a barrier, but the buy-in and the enthusiasm might increase. So it's, like I said, it's a little bit of an off the wall kind of idea, but it might be worth exploring.
No, actually, I don't think it's off the wall at all. And that actually is one function of our annual forum.
Right.
So our donors are invited to the forum. We want them there. And in that way, they get to meet everybody else. They get to meet the NGOs. They get to see students present. They get to connect with our schools. So yeah, we're dispersed around the world, so it's not so easy to do. But technology the same technology that exposed, I think that got all of this going, that exposed this over 20 years ago, this major paucity of trustworthy leadership is the same technology that can bring all of these people who I think, as I said earlier, had good intentions but were working in their own silos. We can now bring all of them together. And I don't think it's crazy at all. I don't know that you can require it, but if you have to require it, there's probably something not quite complete yet with a relationship. But to say to donors, hey, we want you to be part of this experience or this experience, and in this case, the forum, that to me, I think your principle behind that is right on. And I think it's a challenge for any organization to create meaningful experiences. Not, I don't fault anybody for this, but the ones that are purely designed for the wealthiest in an organization to raise money, whether it be an auction or something, that all has a place, but it doesn't really work for us, because we just believe that that value, that monetary value, is going to come from all the other forms of value, namely those that are manifesting themselves from the mission. And when people see that, that's the value.
It's an interesting concept.
So no, I think you're right on.
And I do. It's really a challenge because we're all here trying to do our best, and a lot of that is fueled by opportunity, which is often fueled by access to to either disposable income or just income in general, depending upon where you are, and so it's hard, I think, for organizations, particularly nonprofits, to turn down those opportunities when they come up, but just asking a little bit more and making sure that there's alignment, making sure that there's understanding. Even if you're have a potential opportunity for a large corporate, kind of sponsor or something like that, just making sure that there's some kind of alignment, because if there's not, then the opportunity on both sides is smaller. Whereas if there is alignment, both participants are going to get a lot more out of that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And that principles of shared value I had mentioned before is the glue for our whole organization, all of the partners. And I will tell you, I don't know that I've learned much in my life, but one thing I feel like I've learned about philanthropy is that philanthropy is driven by a philanthropic spirit, not money. Now, the amount of money somebody has might influence the size of the philanthropy, but the amount of money somebody has isn't necessarily correlated with a philanthropic spirit. I don't know if that makes sense. Meaning that, because I always hear this, and I bet a lot of nonprofit people hear it. Oh, we should go speak to these people. They have a lot of money. And when people say that to me, I say, well, I'm not.
Right.
I guess I'm not interested if they have a lot of money. I'm interested if they have a philanthropic spirit. That's what I'm interested in. And if they do, because I'm not going to them for their money, I'm going to them to see if they want to become part of our organization, if they want to get behind this mission. And you know what I mean? I don't mean that to be trite. I actually think that's maybe a different perspective, but that's just been my experience. I mean, there are plenty of people. I mean, Bono said this years ago, and I think he was right, is that this isn't about money. It's not about technology. It's not about resources. It's about will. Do we have the will to do it?
Right.
And because all that other stuff is there. It's just whether, it's just whether we want to work together as a full humanity to ensure justice, to ensure compassion.
I love it. I think that's a great way to look at it, and really understanding what I think we get back into the same boat if all we're doing is throwing money at things. So if we're in a sinking boat and we just kind of throw money at it, then there's not. Yeah. This is kind of ties into what you guys do, and if you just pay to have it fixed, then it's going to get run down again, and you're going to be back in the same problem. Whereas if you work with a nonprofit or someone in country who's experiencing these challenges, you then learn to kind of how to fix it yourself, and or prevent it from happening again. And so, I like that. I like that idea. I think that's just a really interesting way to think about how you guys are encouraging that kind of leadership.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, it keeps us going every day, right, Bill? Yeah, it's intriguing, but you're really getting into this blend of what it means to be human, all the way to how economies work, and what it means to be a global society. I mean, that has been, God, that was at the center of all the political nonsense over the last few years. People using what I thought was deflective language, to believe that we are not global.
How quickly we can get back in our own little box.
I think,
and it's like, well, we all live in this one box. So
yeah,
you can try and cordon off your little section of it.
Yeah, and
at the end of the day, that's not going to work so well. Sure.
No. Well, it'll work for your generation.
Right.
It's not going to work for future.
I really appreciate the two of you being on the show today, and I'd like to ask a few questions at the end. And the first question is, what are your takeaways? How does this all resonate with you in terms of what we discussed today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, as Bob and I were going into this is the first podcast we've been on, and we're sort of like, well, how does this work? What do we get out of it? But I think being able to talk through our ideas, and basically, like, in a sense, Bob and I are often on the phone or on Zoom talking through ideas, but to have someone else who doesn't know us, as intimately as we know the organization, listening and giving ideas and giving feedback, I think for us, it's really helpful to have an outsider in on that conversation, because we talk so much that sometimes we're like, does that make it, it makes sense to both of us, but does anyone else think that makes sense? So I think for me, that was definitely the most useful part, and always just to get out there and to talk through ideas and to keep, I feel like every time we talk, we have a clearer vision of where we're going. So I think that was really useful to me.
Great.
Yeah. Same here. And I think nonprofits are sometimes seen as targets of charity. And I think charity has its place. That's for sure. And there's even the term charitable donations. And And again, I think that has its place. But a conversation like this, contributes to our thinking that that it's more than just charity. To me, strikes of, again, I guess charity is at its best an immediate response. At its worst is an expression of noblesse oblige. And so being in a conversation like this helps me and kind of reminds us that what we're doing is serious business, and we're not interested in being treated in a patronizing way. It's real business, and we want real honesty. We want real transparency, not only at our business level, but all the way to the mission. We don't want people to be quiet. If we want people to question what we're doing, and that makes us stronger and makes us more principled. And so
where can people find
that's
you
what
guys
I take
to
from
learn more about your
sessions
organization
like this?
Yeah, the best way is to go to shouldertoshoulder.com. And as I mentioned, we should have our new website up in a few weeks here, but all of our links to social on shouldertoshoulder.com, and you can see our organizational model and things like that. So that's the best place to go to learn about us.
Fantastic. I like to end these discussions and conversations with an ask, and that is, if you had to ask someone to do something after they've listened to this show, to inspire them and have them take an action, what would that be?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, after hearing about Shoulder to Shoulder, we really are an organization of partners, and the way that we find students, schools, NGO partners really is by word of mouth. We don't advertise or things like that. So I think if someone heard about our mission and felt like they were connected to that mission, if you went to the website and thought, wow, I'd really like my child to learn more about this, passing that on, or I have a business that might be interested in this, or hey, I work at a school or know of a school that is really thinking about this next generation of ethical leaders, I think the best thing would be to do is to reach out to us and tell us about that person, that school, or that nonprofit, or that business that you think would make a good partner with Students Shoulder to Shoulder.
Great.
And I think that's perfect. And I guess what I would add to it as well is if you believe, if your interest is our interests, if your interests align with our mission and with our strategy, the way we're doing things, then get a hold of us, call us, because there is a place in our organization for you. Whether you're a school, whether you're a student, whether you're a business, whether you're a philanthropist, whether you're an NGO, we're looking for people who are seeing the world through this lens, seeing the way forward through this lens. Looking at this idea of blending prosperity with public purpose, seeing the intimate relationship between justice and compassion, and we see that directly connected to developing ethical leadership in a sustainable way, in a way that will in a global way, a way that will connect people from around the world. If you see that, if you identify with that kind of thinking and you're interested, just call us. We want to expand, we want to grow, but we will always know that our effectiveness is going to be rooted in relationships. And so Bill and I, we want to connect with people, and we want to bring people to the table.
Awesome.
And bring them
That's
into
great.
the community.
Thank you guys both so much for being on the show. Bob, Bill, I am really excited to hear how things are going and how you're tracking toward getting that $1 million for your next 4 years.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on, Stu. And now that we're connected, we'll have to, the next time our conference is in person, since you're based in Colorado as well, we'll have to let you know about it and hopefully get a chance to meet you in person.
There you have it, another great episode of Relish This. Thanks for listening. If you would like to learn more about how to apply the audience engagement cycle to expand your organization's mission, there are 2 things you can do. Right now, you can go to missionuncomfortablebook.com to download a copy of my book. While you're there, you can get your purpose-driven marketing score to see where you can unearth some gold for your organization. If you would like to listen to back episodes of the show or sign up to be a guest, go to relishstudio.com/podcast. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week with another great episode of Relish This.